Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Juicy Conversations with Julie. I know some of you might be thinking it's been a while since you heard my voice. Yes, I had to take a little break to focus on my final year exams. I recently finished my undergrad degree, and after that, I also had to recover and rest from what was a very intense exam season, but also just a very intense year. But I'm back better than ever. Before we jump into everything, don't forget to follow, subscribe, comment, like, depending on what platform you're listening on, to this podcast. I appreciate reviews and I get quite a fair amount of feedback in private, which I value so much. If you want to take the conversation further, Juicy Conversations DMs are always open. You can find me on all social media platforms. But now on to today's episode. Today we're discussing Pride. We'll be talking LGBTQ rights, we'll be talking queer history, and I'm extremely excited to welcome my guests today. Hello, guys. Welcome to this episode of Juicy Conversations with Julie. Do you want to all quickly introduce yourselves?
Hi, everyone. My name is Nadia. I'm from Bulgaria. I went to Surrey University and did my bachelor's in international politics. I'm currently doing strategic PR in Scotland. And I work for an American company that has taken Pride not so seriously.
My name is Rose, or originally it's Róża. I'm Polish. Before I went to uni UK, I've spent my entire life in Poland, which I guess gives some context. I'm just finishing up or graduating from my bachelor's degree in international politics. And I will be continuing with my studies kind of in like a gender and queer area of interest.
Yes, hi, I'm Paula. I'm from Poland too. I'm doing my master's right now at Jagiellonian University in Kraków. I study teaching Polish as a foreign language. I love languages and I'm really happy to be here.
Hello everyone, I am Karim, KJ for short. I am a queer intersectional sort of activist. I'm a student at the University of Surrey. I study English literature. I'm originally from Gibraltar, but I'm based here in Guildford as well. And yes, that's about me. I plan on doing law after literature, so I am staying in education for a while, and I especially love educating myself on, queer culture and the LGBTQ history that we have.
Amazing. That will be very helpful today. So let's start us off. To give context to anyone listening, Pride Month has just finished. Today's the 4th of July. So I thought we'd just round up, summarize what you guys thought of this month, and then start us off with a first very general question. Why do you guys think Pride is so needed? I've seen so many conversations on social media this month of we don't need Pride anymore. The LGBT community's got enough rights, and then some people saying that it's not as relevant as it used to be. So why is it so needed? Why is it so important to you? And do you guys think it's especially relevant right now, or maybe less than it used to be?
It is extremely relevant. We'll go into it in a bit more detail. Just to tackle the first part of your question. What do you think about Pride this year? This month. How has it been? It's been interesting. It's been very interesting because obviously last year we had COVID, and that sort of put a spanner in the works quite dramatically to Pride. So this year people were, I guess, allowed to celebrate Pride a bit more freely. And back in Gibraltar is, it's a liberal country or, territory in the southern tip of Spain. It's British, but it's very much tied with the church, and it's quite backwards in some aspects as well. So this year we had a lot of social media backlash, particularly white men saying that Pride is just an excuse for queer people to dominate the culture of Gibraltar for like a month, and just to I guess take space away from the heterosexuals, which is not true. So I think Pride is definitely needed because of this. People still have misconceptions of what Pride is and of what the LGBTQ is. So in one aspect, it is needed for education, so that these people who still think that, homosexuals want to convert heterosexuals, these people can actually learn over time. But then the other point that I wanted to make is that Pride essentially was started, or Pride parades was started by, individuals like Storm Delavine, individuals like Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson, and these were, Black, these were very intersectional, they were transgender, and if you look at it nowadays, transgender people are still within the demographic that get affected most of all, of hate crime and of healthcare, not having adequate healthcare. So if you think about it, like, things have changed, things have progressed, but the group and the demographic who essentially started Pride, Black transgender people, are the ones that are still facing so much adversity as opposed to the white gay male. So that's what I like to look at, the intersectionality of things. And if you think about it like that, Pride is still definitely needed because things need to progress further.
Yeah, absolutely, totally agree with Karim. And I remember recently watching a show, but I remember one of the characters saying that that when Pride started, it was basically a death march. It wasn't a celebration. Most people were walking to their deaths or to their sentences because most people were jailed. And I think I like the idea of Pride being so colourful and such a celebration now. But I think a lot of people, especially people who are not part of the queer community, forget how it started and what the whole point is. And I think it's absolutely fascinating to see how much we've regressed in terms of Pride. And this year I couldn't go to Sofia Pride because I had other arrangements, and also I was a bit scared. But due to these other arrangements, I found myself in the middle of Pride, and it was scary because there was a counter-protest, and people were carrying weapons, they were carrying knives, they had dogs. It wasn't something that was worth celebrating. And I know people had fun, and the concert during Pride was amazing, but also that kind of pressure and that kind of fear, I just couldn't take it.
And it was quite heartbreaking to hear that because, like, I live in Warsaw, so it's the capital of Poland, right? And here the Pride for me is rather a safe place. Luckily, no one's carrying any weapons. I mean, the only weapon that I have seen is a pack of eggs. So it's not a weapon at all, right? But yeah, I would say that we need Pride here in Poland, especially because we are kind of invisible for most society. So it is important to show that we are here, that we are not any different than other people that they know, that we are their children, their friends, their co-workers, that you can have normal conversation with us. For example, I need Pride because I'm still not out to my parents. And I think that this is something that would help them to, understand that simple as that people like me exists, right? So this is one thing, but also another thing is that I said that Pride place because this is the only place that most of the people can freely and without fear hold hands or kiss in public. I love looking at people who are kissing. I love looking at them because they are so free, they are just they're being themselves. They just show love as they should be able to do on everyday basics. So yeah, I think that Pride is extremely important, and I'm really happy that it is taking place in more and more cities in Poland, not only in a capital.
I feel like if you say that, we don't need it because gay people now have the same rights or have nearly the same rights, it's like, you have a very narrowed down view of Pride to your country, of wherever you are, I feel like. And I don't want to approach it, but I think we know which people from which countries usually say that. And I'm always like, okay, but you can get news from any country in the world and see that it's not going so well. I'm not up to speed with generally the events of this Pride because I've kind of logged out of social media news because of well-being reasons over the last few months. But I know that people are still, I'm sorry, but they're still being killed and beaten up. And I don't have the experience of having the same rights because, like, sure, I've been in the UK for like the last 4 years or something like that. But like, when I think of Pride, I still feel of home. Like, home was the only place I've went to Pride. And it's like Paula said, it's like, I'm not going to say it's exactly safe. Like, I still know that some people got beaten up in the midst of Pride. But it's also the kind of, I don't want to blame anyone. Obviously, it's kind of the safety kind of things. Like, when I went the first time, I went in 2016, and the last one, unfortunately, I went to was 2017, I think. We went together. You go, and my parents knew I was going, and my mom was like, bottle of water, good shoes, the nearest subway station, and if you carry anything, you put that in a bag. It's like, it's an instruction you get. And obviously I haven't been the last few years, and I imagine it's getting worse. I know there was some kind of protest when we went, but it was very small and very tiny. It was like on...
Yeah, maybe like 5 people screaming in the background.
So, but also, I will say it, for me, it was just fun. It was this one moment when you go out, you get to meet with the people from your community, and you just get to breathe and have fun and scream Lady Gaga lyrics and things like that, which I think like is really needed, because you go through this entire year thinking, logically, there are other people, but quite often you kind of go thinking like, oh, I'm alone, or like there's no one else, or like no one knows what this struggle is like, and things like that. And then you get this 1 month when you get to go out, and people are like even go about companies being performative, and I fully agree with that. But it's fun to go out in London and see Victoria Beckham sporting rainbow flags and everything, you know what I mean? Like, I know this is performative capitalism at its finest, but I mean, I still enjoy seeing it. It gives me a little bit of spring in my step here and there. And I do also have the creepy tendency that if I see the same sex couple holding signs, like, I just like, oh, it's like, and it gives you that little comfort blanket around you. Yeah, we need it. Because it's a breath of fresh air for people who, especially if you're closeted, it's also nice to see it out there. And also, especially in Poland, I feel like now it's very closely tied to protests as well.
I would also like to pick up on something that you said, very, very interesting. You said that, what was it? You said something about, or relating to the fact that people use the excuse, oh, you've already got rights and you've already got, like, equality. And this annoys me because if we, push that to the side and we look at, for example, how a black person technically has the same rights as a white person, but it boils down to more than just rights on paper. And it's a really flimsy excuse to say, oh, well, you already have rights. I mean, what is rights other than, a piece of law that we don't have physically, and we just have like a general consensus to, behave in a certain way. Just because you have rights doesn't mean, if it was like that, if it was that easy, BLM wouldn't really be a thing. Like Juneteenth wouldn't really be a thing. If it was that easy to just say, oh, you have rights now, everybody's going to change, then, we wouldn't be in this situation. It's the fact that despite having rights on paper, people still attack you. People still, have prejudice towards you. And it's really, really flimsy because we've seen in the past year, in the past month, the Dominican Republic has actually criminalized or restricted the expression of homosexuality and the protection of homosexuality in their country. So you can't really say, oh, you have rights when, Poland happens to be in the state that it is, in terms of, homosexuality, homophobia, the rise of homophobia in government and the promotion of, or the restriction. of the expression of homosexuality. And then also in the Dominican Republic and in so many other countries, you know, we don't have rights, and we have rights in certain places, but even in those places, there is still stigma, there is still prejudice, there is still discrimination. So that's just a really flimsy excuse. And it really boils my blood whenever somebody tells me that. So
I definitely agree. I think if you take away exactly as you said, even the social aspect of things, even the fact that it is way harder for members of the LGBT community to feel included, to feel accepted. If you just look at it from a rights point of view, I wouldn't even agree that they have the same rights. I think it's 29 countries that have made same-sex marriage legal out of 195. In the most advanced nations, they don't. Transgender rights, I mean, are close to none in most of Europe, in the United States, which are literally said to be countries that are supposed to set an example, even though I think we'll all agree that they don't, but they don't have the same rights. And so I think the argument is even more flawed because it's just not true. And I think that's one of the things that I love with Pride is the activism and the education. As a cisgender heterosexual woman, I've got so much education still to do when it comes to LGBT rights, when it comes to queer history, and it's something I love looking into, but because nobody taught me this, Pride is really the month where people go out of their way and are like, okay, sit down and listen. But I also wish it didn't have to be a thing. We shouldn't have to have LGBT activists. We shouldn't have to have people from the community educating people not from the community. And months like Pride should exist just to celebrate. And for all the positive reasons that you've stated, it shouldn't be violence. It shouldn't be something where you're risking your safety, where you're risking your life. And then when you take away that month, so many members of the LGBT community will tell you that they do feel like they're at risk every day of their lives. Just like a lot of marginalized communities are in many ways, but I see so many testimonies, I speak to so many friends who are scared to hold hands with their partners in public, who are scared to kiss their partners in public, just because they know that their identity may cause them physical harm, which just shows how important Pride is, I think, altogether. It's the fact that, yeah, some people feel so oppressed just being themselves that they fear for their lives. So the argument that we don't need it just doesn't make any... If we didn't need it, it just wouldn't exist. It would have never been a thing in the first place if it really wasn't needed, and definitely wouldn't still be a thing if it wasn't needed. So I think, yeah, the argument is obviously very flawed, but it's nice to remind people of why it's so flawed.
Yeah, can I just say one more thing?
Of course.
I'm blabbering on here, but you touched on their education, and that ties in nicely with, you know, Pride essentially initially was a protest. That's what people, you know, forget, and some people don't know. That Pride was a protest, and above everything else, it was, as you said, to purely, like, you know, create social, you know, mayhem against the police, and, you know, to really be vocal. But it was also about education, and not necessarily education solely based on, again, the white homosexual male, or, you know, I guess the poster boys for the LGBTQ, because people forget that the LGBTQ is not just about gay people, or, like, you know, simply lesbian people. We fall into the trap of sometimes painting everybody with the same brush. And I think now more than ever, Pride is moving, or should be moving, into a more educational environment where we teach people that you can be, you know, gay, and you can be black, and you can be feminine. That's like three, you know, minorities within minorities, that, you know, you can be gay, or you can be, you know, bisexual and disabled, and these people do exist. That you can be transgender, you know, from male to female, but still act masculine because that's how you want to express yourself. So there are so many intersectional elements to Pride, and that's what people don't understand. Another thing as well, asexuality, very, very misunderstood and very, you know, not talked about. I recently have been really reflecting, and pretty sure I'm demisexual. So, and that is something that, like, I wasn't taught, that, you know, people just disregard it, and it's like everybody likes, you know, sex. Or can we say that? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Please, my episode before this was about sex and pleasure, so please.
Yeah, like, people are really quick to say, like, oh yeah, just everybody loves sex. And as well, there's a misconception, because I did a podcast 2 days ago, and we were talking about how people in particular Brighton Pride, the individuals in Brighton and sort of the neighborhoods in that, some people have a really bad view of Brighton Pride because it's over sexualized.
Yeah.
And now that's stemming from the problem that sex, is bad and it's a sin and it's this and it's that. And it makes people believe that, the LGBTQ is just sexual, which, fair enough, it is a big part of the LGBTQ, which is about, sex and sexual liberation. But that is why, because we have been oppressed for so long sexually, that it's okay for people to have like this outburst of, sexual energy. And at the end of the day, it's working to, reduce the stigma that sex is bad. At the end of the day, it isn't. However, we oftentimes overlook people who view sex in a different way, asexual, demisexuals. We've got this spectrum that people aren't really aware of. And what that does is that creates, discomfort in you thinking you have to have sex with, your significant other, your partner, because you haven't realized that maybe you're asexual. And, that is touching upon like quite a touchy subject, because then, you give consent, but are you really consenting? And then this and that. And like, if you're not sexually aware of yourself, then you're going to be unhappy. And that's what happened to me for a while. I was very like, oh, well, should I have it? Should I not? Like, and Pride and education, Pride Month, and people that I met through the LGBTQ community have really taught me these past few months. So I really think there's an element of education there, an important element of education about sex, about sexual identification. One thing doesn't define you, because you are made up of many, 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 many different things.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to say there.
Just to go back quickly on the point about sex, I think, and guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm correct, the people who started liberating and opening conversations about sexuality in the first place was the LGBTQ community anyways. So now you can't complain that they're over-sexual, and hypersexualization is another thing, because hypersexualization can be put on you by members that are not from your community. But over-sexualization, one, you can't complain, because like we really just need to accept that sex is a thing, whether you want to have it, whether you don't, whether you have it low, it's just a thing. Everybody does it. That is literally how every single one of us came to be. So we just need to accept that it's a thing. And they literally liberated that. They started that conversation for so many people, and now it's being held against them. But also, it just ties in. As I mentioned, my last episode was about sex. Go watch it. Go listen to it if you haven't. And one of the guests, Pete, which some of you will know, said like one of the issues is we were talking about STIs and why there's so much stigma. It was just because people really believe that STI started from gay men. And it's the whole AIDS epidemic of the big bad gay, and they're the ones that put this on us. And it's just the villainization of the LGBTQ community, in a way, is very linked to the villainization of sex. The villainization of sex comes from a lot of other things, including religion, society, the patriarchy. But a certain extent of this being so liberal about people's sexualities, and people continuing to try to oppress people when they talk about their sexuality, whatever it may be, comes from the fact that the first people that were like, okay, let's talk about this, were the people that looked at sex and identity and gender in a different way than society enabled them to. And that just all links, again, that just proves how homophobic society just is and how homophobically built it has been. It's just the fact that the people who are trying to start the most important conversations are the same people that are being shamed for these conversations, and it's just a vicious circle of oppression from then on.
Paradox of oppression.
Yeah, literally.
Also, just to jump in, when we're talking about education, that kind of dictionary is worth putting out there, so that people can have access to easy definitions of what each kind of definition means, so what asexual means, and intersexual, what demisexual means, because I think a lot of people, even in the queer community, forget about those aspects because they themselves are not that much educated on the topic, and they're like, oh, we don't know anything, so we can't do anything about it. And if our own community doesn't have this full information, that we can't expect people outside of our community to be educated, especially when they start a conversation with us. And we can't give them just a short definition, just with a few words to explain what everything means. We can't expect someone to be educated without us knowing it first, because we are part of the community and we're there to support each other, no matter our differences in religion, in identification. But if we don't know it, we can't expect other people to know it.
This actually ties in what I wanted to say, is that what came up lately, and I keep this in my mind all the time now, is that actually proximity to the subject doesn't make you an expert on the subject. And I think that's something we forget so much, especially, which was, I think, extremely visible with BLM as well, because, you know, if anybody had a friend or a newer person of color, then they would just flock to them and be like, tell me things. And it's also within LGBTQ plus community, and I think, like, we forget, like, this, I'm sorry to say, but this community is full of racist, transphobic people, biphobic people, sexist. Like, it's not this beautiful bubble where everyone is happy and tolerates everyone and who acceptance wins. And I feel like we really need to be conscious of, like, where you take your knowledge from, which individuals. And also, like, if you're listening to us, like, I'm really grateful for giving me the time, but the truth is, like, we're all sitting in the safety of our homes. I've never personally been attacked or thrown out of my house or, you know, threatened or anything like that. So I can talk about my experiences, which weren't a walk in the park either, but, like, I'm a white woman, I'm passing, like, I have to actively out myself. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not, me walking down the street, like, I'm not in any state of danger unless I decide, I don't like this word, but, like, unless I decide to make myself a target, let's say. I'm not victim blaming, obviously, but, you know, like, it's really easy for me to keep safe. So I just want everybody to keep in mind that, like, you know, we're a bunch of quite lucky individuals in the whole scheme of things.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting that you said that, because I'm kind of like a foil to you then. So and it's not no problem at all, because I'm vocal about LGBTQ issues anyways, but I'm very, like, the way I dress, the way I carry myself, the way, like, you can, it's bad to say, but I guess you can tell, and that's something that we need to work on as a whole together. You know, not putting anyone in a box as hard as it is, because we all have, you know, assumptions of each other, and there's stereotypes that are really hard to not believe in, you know, like how a gay man walks and how he carries himself and, you know, how he dresses, because at the end of the day that deters people who are actually, you know, straight and just want to put a bit of makeup on. So, you know, really, it's damaging. It is really, really damaging. But yeah, like, I'm kind of a foil to you. I'm like, I walk down the street and, you know, people, I guess, can tell, and it's interesting because even, you know, within the LGBTQ community, within, you know, Pride Month and Pride Parades, it's for everybody. Pride is for everyone, including people, you know, who are cis passing, who are straight passing, who are for people who don't like sex, for people who do like sex, for people who are, you know, pansexual, aromantic, every single person. And, you know, this community is very, very big. We've got different ends of the spectrum, and we've got many spectrums as well. We've got the people who are femme, people who are masc, even though, again, what does that mean as well? Like, what is to be femme? What is to be masc? So it's just so big, and I think that's another reason why Pride is needed to, like, round us off. It's because there's just so much to cover, and, you know, 52 years isn't enough. Pride has been happening for 52 years. First Pride Parade happened in 1969 in Chicago. So, you know, 52 years might appear as a long time, but it's only been recently that countries have started to decriminalize homosexuality in itself. Like, my country, Gibraltar, decriminalized homosexuality 28 years ago, which, that's nothing. That is absolutely nothing. Like, if you think about it, 28 years ago, it was, you know, a crime to be homosexual in my place, and my place isn't even that bad. You know, it's quite a progressive, you know, politically and socially, but just because of the church and stuff. So there's still a lot of work to be done, and yeah, that's That's what I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, and also what Rosa says and what you, Karim, says. When it comes to the spectrums, like I identify as pansexual, and my current partner is male, and I'm lucky that living in Bulgaria, I pass as straight, but previous relationships, I dated girls, and I remember how scared I was to walk down the street holding hands, because obviously, even if I'm femme-looking, it's not. People can tell, as you said, and it becomes an issue. But then again, I think, yeah, a lot of the issues I've had from within the queer community is when I say I'm pansexual, people just dismiss it. Yeah. They're like, yeah, no, you're not. You're just bi, or you're just going through a phase, and that's coming from people from within the community. And I'm like, you're supposed to be the kind of the people who open up the conversation about discrimination and how we can avoid it, and there you are standing right in front of me saying that my identity is not valid, and it just shocks me, and the hate within the community is something appalling.
Yeah, that kind of segues perfectly into my next question. I was just thinking, because we mentioned a lot of things, whose job it is to educate who. In my opinion, and I think I've said this in every single episode, it is never up to the oppressed to educate the oppressor. And by being on the oppressor's side, it doesn't mean that you're oppressing yourself. Like, for example, again, I'm cis and het. I don't oppress the community because I'm very much, and as everyone should be, on the side of LGBTQ rights, but still, I'm still on the side of the oppressor. We've also mentioned violence, which I know it's something, KJ, that you touched upon in your own podcast. So the big question would be, today, in today's world, and maybe in the countries that we know as well, more specifically, what would you say are still the biggest challenges in the fight for LGBTQ rights?
I have one main thing to say, I guess, about that to start us off. I liked what you said about you can still you form part of the oppressor group, but you're in all sense of the word an ally. And today, in this day and age, how Pride is today, I think other than the actual challenges, the legislations that need to be changed, the attitudes that need to be changed, looking at it in a very, big lens, big perspective, I think that Pride and queer culture, LGBTQ culture, snowballed into a multi-generational movement, something that has spanned many years, and it's becoming, it is an actual movement. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, people would have just been like, oh yeah, it's these group of people that have a sexual abnormality. But now it is a movement, and what every movement faces, and you can see this with feminism, first wave feminism, second wave feminism, third wave and fourth wave, and now people throw around the term radical feminism and feminazi and all these, terms. It's going to happen with the LGBTQ. It has started to happen. So because of RuPaul's Drag Race, I'm not blaming at all, but because of RuPaul's Drag Race, because of the mainstream entity that the LGBTQ has become, because of the culture, because we have created our own culture, we have cultivated our own really community. Because of that, people are like, well, they're done. That's it. They now they want too much. Exactly like how the word feminist has been misconstrued and people don't want to identify with that anymore because of the connotations. Women don't actually want to. Many women don't, because it's like, oh no, that's like not me. I'm not a feminist because that's too much. That's going to happen with the LGBTQ as well. That is going to happen because people are going to think that the work is done. That now we just want to take over the world. That now we're in, and this is coming from, I heard people say this back in my home in my home country. It's too much now. There's flags everywhere. They want to take over this and that, and it creates a very you versus them, or you versus them versus us type of situation. And the only way that I see this not negatively impacting us is by allyship. So allyship is very important. So I've given the problem, and now the difficulty, or how we can overcome the difficulty, is that we really need allies now more than ever to not only educate themselves. And you mentioned the point of like, it's up to the ally to really educate themselves. Yes, it is. But I don't mind if an ally comes up to me and wants to have a discussion, if they want to have because Google search and the internet is good, and it has provided me with a lot of information, but I can't think of anything better than to actually sit down with an LGBTQ person.
Yeah.
And because that person, we've experienced maybe what you're trying to say. If you want to know about demisexuality, the best way is to ask a demisexual person. Mm-hmm. If you want to know about transgender, how it is to be it, or the experiences, talk to a transgender person. Don't talk to a cis gay person, because you're going to get a better experience talking to a transgender person. So I think we need allies now more than ever. Through the use of allies, I really think that it will familiarize and normalize LGBTQ culture even further. Yeah.
Just to go back very quickly on the part about the oppressor education, I just think for me, I get a lot of questions because if some of you follow me on social media, not recently because just like you, Rose, I've needed a break from social media and news. These 2 years have just been too hard mentally. But normally I am quite, I wouldn't call myself necessarily an activist, but I'm a very strong feminist. I'm a very strong BLM supporter. And I've done a lot, I'd like to think, especially towards the BLM cause and for BLM women, to educate. But also sometimes when men come up to me and is like, okay, but how do I make you feel safe? Or someone comes up to me and is like, oh, what does colorism mean? Sometimes I just don't want to talk about it. Like, of course, I'm very happy to sit down and have those conversations. But sometimes there are things that you can just look up, not necessarily just through simple Google search, but there's so many resources and there's so many people from those communities that have put stuff out there that you can read, that you can listen to, that you can watch. And sometimes it's just a bit, the fact that people just hold on to their token whatever friend, I'm just like, no, I don't want to talk about colorism today. I don't want to talk about bullying that I faced because of my skin color. I don't want to. If you want to learn more about it, go online and look for the people who talked about it from that community. But it's just like, if you really want to educate yourself, you can go further than just ask your closest friend who's this, who identifies as this. We already have to kind of carry the burden without sounding dramatic or like I'm playing the victim, but we have to carry the burden of not being accepted, no matter what our identity is, because society has decided that it would just be harder for us. We then don't want to have to carry the burden every single day of having to dismantle all that, but also educate everyone. Just like, guys, it's out there. It's all out there. If you want answers, you will find them through other people than just your close friends who identify as whatever.
Totally. And just to finish off that point, I think by getting people or getting, allies to educate themselves, what we are doing is we are dismantling the whole, because allies or, straight people, I don't want to generalize, but straight people normally find it uncomfortable to ask questions. Very, very uncomfortable. And I never came out. So I didn't want to, write a post on Facebook and come out or, make it a big thing. What I did instead was I wanted people to just ask if they felt like they were close to me and they could ask. Obviously I don't speak for everybody else. But I like it when people, ask and are respectfully, polite, they just ask and they try and educate themselves. And that can be done, as you said, online and, finding the resources. And people need to realize that it's okay to ask, how does asexuality work with being gay? And it can seem in your head like a really intrusive question, but you can ask those questions, because I feel like one of the biggest dangers as well is straight or, non-LGBTQ people thinking that they have to like walk on eggshells around us, because as long as you're respectful, you don't have to walk on eggshells. You don't have to like, you know, censor anything, as long as you are respectful. So ask those difficult questions, and ask those questions that you will then be able to relate to or relay back to your family members who might think a particular way, and to your straight friends who might think a particular way. So by asking those questions, you're not only getting more information, but you are reducing the stigma of them versus us. Again, like, it just depends how you ask it. Obviously, it depends the situation. Like, you're not gonna meet a person and automatically, hi, I'm Karim, are you gay? Like, but it's just to have an awareness that you can ask questions and that it's okay to ask questions.
Yeah, in terms of education, I also think that we should not forget about the school. And what I mean here is not like extra classes that would teach you like LGBTQ history, because this is not necessary in my opinion, but we all have literature classes, right, at school. So for example, when a poet or when an author is gay, or was gay probably, we can mention it, right?
No, we cannot. They were not gay. They were just very friendly.
We don't mention stuff like that. No.
You can't.
There's a friendship between men.
And they reminded me of them ever. And they're like, they were very friendly.
They had a very open sexuality is the one I always saw. They loved life. They're gay. Just say it. It's fine. Like, it's no one is going to be shocked in the room. We know they exist, and we don't mind them. We're the ones that mind them. We really don't care.
Exactly. And this is exactly what I'm talking about, especially because you see through their poems, through their books. I can think of like at least 3 names of like Polish authors that were probably bisexual or homosexual, but I only learned it because I was determined to learn more about the community, about the history. So this would be also good, because I think that people tend to think that homosexuality and LGBTQ people are something new, right? That it only appeared in the last, I don't know, like 50 years, 100 years or whatever. And it is just not true, right? I took part in a project. It was done by a Polish artist, like an amateur artist, and the purpose was to show people that we existed all the time. Like, we have existed since the very beginning. So people were writing, for example, fan fiction inspired by Polish history, right? So for example, like a big love between 2 girls or 2 guys happened in, I don't know, in the 10th century, in the 15th century. You could just feel the spirit of the times, and at the same time you see like, yeah, like for sure something like that happened. Like, it is just impossible not to, right? Mm-hmm. It is just so, I don't know, like heartwarming. And I think like a lot of people should see that, because this is a part of our history. Like, there's no history without LGBTQ people, right?
Yeah.
Like, how many art pieces, how many things wouldn't have happened? So yeah, I think that schools should play a big part here. Yeah, not only to show how friendly people are, but to show that people love themselves and each other also, right? So yeah, allyship is a very important thing for sure, but I am an education person, so to say. So yeah, I just think that school is the place that's, you know, like shapes us. This is the place that shapes us, and that shapes community. So teachers are like extremely important people, and we should focus on them also.
Sorry, just a quick throwaway point. I find it funny. Well, I find it funny. It's very sad, actually, in terms of like Polish school, where the taboo is drawn, because we have an artist that they will tell you he tried every substance under the sun to make his art. And that's a thing, and they will put him on the walls, and they will tell you, if you see his painting and you turn it around, it says what he was exactly flying on when he was making this painting. Cool, that's a thing you tell 15-year-olds, I think, because it was middle school. And then when it comes to, like, I kid you not, the majority of male Polish figures that are like these national heroes, they are like extremely important We know, we suspect, we kind of, and they will never mention it.
I think going on what Paula was saying as well, yes, education, again, is very, very important because where people have been here, and this is another argument that people love to use, and this one's just so ignorant in so many ways. It's amazing how these people actually have jobs and actually, honestly, without insulting, like the one that I love to hear is, oh, well, it's a new thing. Like there were, back in my day, there weren't any, like, no, back in your day, people were in the closet. That is, it's a simple fact. It's not that we're new. It's that, why can't you understand that why is this woke culture, you know, transgender, non-binary? It's because in your day you didn't allow that to happen. You didn't cultivate a good enough society enough that, you know, allowed for expressions to come into existence. And another thing, in terms of education, that's why it's really important to diversify curriculums, because, as we said, we didn't learn about, you know, certain characteristics of authors and poets and painters and all this. But, you know, in my university, we have a diversity team who looks at diversifying modules, making sure that, you know, I do English literature, so we have a certain percentage of authors that are black, that are women, that are gay, that are this, that are that, to ensure that we are, you know, looking at different perspectives. And that's why I think doing that at school level would be amazing. The issues are, you know, famously that people want to protect children, and that is horrible because, you know, Section 28, Margaret Thatcher, that was a really, really big, you know, legislation that sort of absolutely restricted the promotion of homosexuality in schools, and that has had such an impact in the UK, such an impact. I mean, massively. Local authorities weren't allowed to do anything. School authorities weren't allowed to do anything if you were getting homophobia, you know, if you were faced with it, you know, you weren't taught about that in school. Nothing was happening. It was just very, very, very restrictive. So that's why I think it's so important to try and get more LGBTQ education in school without it being a class. You know, it doesn't have to be a class. It's not like we want it to be a class. We just want to have it, like, you know, if there's a maths guy who created something and you're teaching it, just mention that, you know. I remember, you know, learning about Fleming and what he did and who he was and the Petri dish and all this. Why can't we just include little facts that will then help queer kids in that situation? Because if I would have learned about queer poets being queer myself back then, imagine, like, just people like to assume that everybody is heterosexual. Heteronormativity, it's a thing. Heteronormativity in schools, massively a thing as well. So that's my 2 cents again. Very, very important, and thank you, Paula, for bringing that into discussion, because that's extremely important.
Yes, definitely. This is something that I'm so keen on, actually. You know, looking for like queer jobs everywhere. This is super important. I think that men have it a little bit easier, and I'm saying this because it is like easier for people to understand that a man can be homosexual or can feel attraction towards men. Like, there's a lot of, for example, like letters, or, you know, like every little thing can be interpreted as an attraction or like a feeling of attraction. Whereas when it comes to women, and this was my personal problem as well when I was trying to like read some queer biographies, that people used to like or rather tend to justify it as friendship, right? They lived together for 20 or 30 years. She left her husband for her just because they were very close friends. Yeah, this is something like that. So, definitely it should be mentioned. So sorry, I'm just like repeating myself. I'm hearing it.
You mentioned a really good point, actually, because I want to bring another point to it. It's really, really, there's a dichotomy, or there's something going on where it's easier. I don't want to say easier, because then, like, obviously we have the black male and the black female, and that's, you know, a whole different ball game to be gay and to be black and to be female or male or whatever. But it's easier, or it's accepted more so ish again, for males to, you know, be sexually divergent, as in, you know, what people would call sexually divergent. So in terms of when you have gender and sexuality, is what I want to say, which is quite hard to explain. People accept that males can be gay more than, you know, females can be gay. And then if you flip the script, people can accept more gender abnormalities if, like, a female wants to wear trousers and if a female wants to be masculine, whereas a boy can't. So you've got, a boy is more, I don't know, free in his sexuality, I guess, and a female is more free in gender, I guess, because you've got tomboyism. Tomboyism is something that I looked at in one of my essays. And again, parents accept tomboyism. Parents accept, you know, they joke about their daughter being a tomboy. Obviously, because the males have been dominant, and it's, in a way, I guess, powerful to assert your daughter being, you know, quite massive. I don't know. That is beyond me. But yeah, so tomboyism is accepted. But I remember in being a child and being like, can I be a tom girl? Like, is there an opposite? Is there an opposite of tomboy? Am I the opposite of tomboy? Am I a tom girl? And I remember thinking that so many times, and it's just like, no, you can't. So you've got, you know, girls can wear trousers, and girls can, you know, not want to play with Barbies, but then if a boy does it, if a boy wants to wear a skirt, no. Yeah. So that's interesting. But then again, you've got, if a man is gay, people seem to, you know, accept them, but if a female is gay, people seem to think that they're confused or something like that. So it's very interesting. It's very
I just wanted to pitch in on what Paula was saying about just biography when we're being taught about a scientist or a poet or a writer, whatever, in school. I think a lot of times when we have an author who has had many partners, like he's been married a few times to different women, he had mistresses and stuff like that, that is being taught. And that is something you are expected to know about this person, about their personal life. But when it comes to queer authors, they don't tell you anything. And I think that's the problem, because you're celebrating heterosexuality and sex in a way that is saying, oh, it's okay to have to be married 5 times, to have had mistresses, and that is something because that purely stems from the artistic side of this person. But when from that artistic side stems something that is out of the norm, it's not being talked about. And I think, at least for me in school, that was kind of missing, because a lot of the boys in my class were like, oh, so it's okay to like go from a girl to a girl to a girl because we're artists, because we're doing this. Mm-hmm. But when queer people were just trying to be included in the conversation, not being too loud about their identity, just wanting to be included in the conversation, they were being pushed to the side.
Yeah. I think that's just where the patriarchy comes in, because if you look at someone like, let's say Frida Kahlo, for example, she's literally one of my favorite artists. She is very well known for having had many sexual partners, for having had many relationships, and she was very well known for that because she said it. And when you look at the representation of Frida Kahlo, even though she is still seen as one of the world's greatest artists, she's represented as someone that's dirty. People speak about her death and literally degrade her. It is because of her sexuality that she died. No, it's not because she was having too much sex that she died. But you look at someone like, for example, French author Victor Hugo, he's very well known as well for having had many affairs. It is expected from men in general, but from men that are considered artists to just have all these affairs. And of course, but it's because they're well spoken and they're so the artistic mind has an element of creativity and a fluidity, and that I think a lot of people are really attracted to, not even in the sexual term, but just in general. But it's like, it's because of this he attracted loads of women, but then you've got Frida Kahlo doing the same thing and she's being shamed. And these are two officially heterosexual people. So when then you bring in the queer element of it, it's a double oppression, because you've got obviously the patriarchy, but then you've also got heteronormativity, and it's just a vicious circle. But also, like, I feel like we're all trying to be more diverse, and as you said, like, there's diversity officers now overlooking programs to make sure that there's more representation. Just like we talk about MLK, or like I'm sure we will in years to come talk about George Floyd in history. Why are we not talking about the Stonewall riots? Why are we not talking about Marsha P. Johnson? Why are we not talking about all of these things? We put so many things in history books. We talk about, recently, one of the things I saw is now in history books, like in my younger sister's history books, they talk about the Paris terrorist attacks, which happened literally not even 10 years ago, which happened fairly recently. They're already in history books as something life-changing. Why is queer history not mentioned when it is part of history? Why are we not bringing the queer element to the conversation? And include all those things, because so much of our history has been shaped, of course, just like so much of our history has been shaped by women and by people of color and by just what makes this world. Why are we not including queer history? And this all then links to the element of intersectionality. It's been mentioned back and forth, and just that intersectionality to it all, of like, depending on who you are, depending on your whole social identity, depending on where you are, you will face more prejudice, and even within the community, which is something you touched on.
I am very passionate about transgender issues, because if we look at statistics alone, transgender women, black transgender women in the US go missing and get murdered weekly.
Yeah.
And I'm saying weekly. Like, there are cases, if you looked, you would find weekly cases, because I follow transgender activists who share these stories. I follow them, and people don't give enough attention to that. And with everything, stuff needs to maybe take a back seat for a while, because my friends, and I love them to bits, and people that I know and that support me, they're always sharing stuff about gay people and about being lesbian and about loving who you love, but they never share about transgender violence. They never share about, you know, the issues that transgender people face medically as well. I think, like, I don't want to, you know, add things up or make a point like they're suffering more than us, but transgender people face what we face in a similar way, plus the added expenses of needing to go through surgeries if they want to. The majority of them do, needing to, you know, have therapy sessions, hospital time. Again, when they are fully themselves, they are vulnerable to their partner attacking them because they didn't realize that they were, or their lover or whoever they have a thing with. You know, there's been so many cases where transgender women are murdered in hotel rooms because what happens? They get kicked out of their home. They're in the streets. They have nothing else to do. They become, you know, they go into prostitution, and then, you know, they get picked up by men who are looking for some fun. They go pick them up, go to a hotel room. They realize that they are not 100% what they were looking for, and they retaliate. And there's actually a law. It's called the Gay Defense Law, and people have avoided jail time because you can actually plead that you did what you did out of self-defense because you didn't realize that person was transgender. And that is mass. Let that sink in. There is actually a law that allows that. So that's why I feel like situation, the average gay person, what the average gay person goes through and what the average transgender person goes through is not the same. And I will say it frankly, their suffering, it looks right now like their suffering is more I don't want to say that, but I just know transgender people, and I just know how much they do suffer. So I can't really sit here and say we're all the same. They need their limelight, and they need it now, because stuff is getting really serious when it comes to to that issue. So yeah, sorry, I just get really passionate about that.
No, for sure.
Because I think it is also great that we are finally focusing on transgender people. Especially and there's this one very important thing, because we are all kind of in the English speaking world, right? But we also speak other languages. And what I mean by that is that English is luckily not a very gendered language. But when it comes to Polish, for example, well, you cannot talk about someone, about the past, about the future, sometimes even without gendering. And what I mean by that is that in terms of transgender people, or more specifically non-binary people, it is so difficult to be inclusive. I mean, Polish doesn't really let us be 100% inclusive. We need to decide what gender we choose to talk about someone. My friends recently came out to me as a non-binary, and to be honest, sometimes I feel very how to call this? I'm not really sure how to refer to them in Polish, because I know what pronouns they prefer, but I just cannot. My language doesn't let me. So talking them freely in English, but in my own native language, this is just impossible.
Yeah.
When we talk about activism, when we talk about transgender people, we also, I think that language is something that should be changed as well.
Yeah.
But not in not up to bottom, but rather bottom to up, right? So the very basic thing we can do is to give those people voice, for them to decide how they want to be referred to, how they want to be talked about.
I personally don't feel like I'm educated enough on the topic or have enough proximity to it. That's why I'm always a bit I don't really know what to say. Obviously, I do agree with KJ. They deserve their lime spot, and they deserve it now because it's an issue and we need to talk about it. There are specific laws that outlaw gender expression outside of the heteronormative standard. People are prosecuted on the basis of those in general terms. And I do actually agree with Paula a lot about the language, because first of all, unfortunately, in Polish discourse, language is a big thing. And second of all, it's the mean of communication, it's the mean of education. If we don't make space for people in the language, how are you going to make it in a society? Because you don't know how to talk about them respectfully. So, there's so many, and in terms of activism, there's so many things you need to focus on. And first of all, it's not a pie, which we all know.
Yeah.
So even if you have to take a backseat for a while, that's fine. It will come back there when it's needed, when it's important. Mm-hmm. It is the circle, I guess, of the way minority movements go, that once you, I'm not saying gay and lesbians have equal rights, but they fought a lot, they've gotten a lot, so now everybody else is trying to catch up, right? I feel like that's kind of how it works, that bridging the gap within the community now, rather than just saying it's not important at all. And I obviously there is a percentage of duty of your own responsibility to educate yourself, but we have to also be mindful that we're talking about teenagers, we're talking about kids. They will not be there Googling stuff for 5 hours a day. Mm-hmm. They don't even, no offense, but majority of them won't even know how to properly do research. So in terms of educating, I feel like the best thing we can do, especially in the school system, is teaching people critical thinking, because we don't do that. We teach them to memorize stuff. So if you do that, you teach them how to question their sources. That's in my opinion, that's how it goes. I also have I don't think it's a controversial take, but I do think religion should not. I think religion should be taught in school, like history is. I would like to have actual religion or actual ethics, and the rest of it you can have a Sunday school. I'm really sorry, but that's what I agree with, and I feel like it's
for sure.
It's a big thing we have going on in Poland right now, especially.
I've got a quote just for, just that I once came across, and it's really, really impactful. Your belief is your belief, but my existence is a reality. So, you can believe what you want to believe. You can believe in your religion. We are not here trying to get you to, excommunicate you from the church or whatever. You can believe, but at the end of the day, it is a belief. And I'm sorry to whoever that offends, that, I'm not going to sit here and say your God is real, your God is not. I'm just going to say we exist. We are here. We are tangible right here. So you can believe whatever you want to believe, but that doesn't mean that, you can erase us, because we are actually here.
Exactly. And faith is something that's just so personal. It's so personal to every individual. And that's why I think it should be left out of mainstream conversations, because this, even though people don't want to accept it, is and should be a mainstream conversation, because it's so intimate. Your relationship with God, your relationship with your religion is down to you. What you choose to believe is down to you. And there's no right or wrong. We're not saying that anyone is. I mean, if you think homophobic things, you are realistically just wrong, because you shouldn't try to oppress someone just because you don't agree with how they live their lives, because who really cares? But I think, of course, believe what you want, but exactly, it's down to you. It's something so personal, and it's something, I have a lot of religious friends, I have religious family, and they all say, my religion is my religion. That's down to me, and it's behind closed doors. It's between me and myself, me and God. You can't interpret human rights. You can't, there's no interpretation when it comes to equality, but when it comes to religion, there are many, and I'm not saying that makes it a bad thing. Of course there should be, but there's no kind of gray line of but what if they're this, what if they've done that? No. Basic human rights, we should just all have the same, and equality is not something that can be argued against.
Don't know if this is going to abruptly change the subject, but I noticed that you wanted to talk about homophobia-based violence.
Yeah.
So I just think I want to say quick few things, minute of your time. So this is something that I touched upon in my podcast last week, and so in the UK this past month, so as in June 2021, this past month, there has been a spike in homophobia-based violence up in the north in particular, so Liverpool, Manchester, Stratford area, and they've all been, I think 3 of them were gay men, white gay men, and one of them was I believe, this is me, assuming, it was a white female, guessing maybe bisexual or, lesbian, queer, and they were bad, not name calling, as in physically assaulted. I've got pictures on my Instagram of my podcast, and yeah, it's really, really bad. This has been in the past month, 4 attacks in the same area. Pride Month as well. Let that sink in the UK. So what this means is that, what I want to leave you with, I guess, because this is a whole topic that already talks about, but what I want to leave you with is that if those people are white gay males and white female, imagine this, and this is what we classify as the privileged within the LGBTQ. And these people, there's been 4 in the past month. So just imagine everybody else.
Yeah.
Just imagine if what we classify as the most privileged have been really, really hurt. Imagine, that's all I'm going to leave you with them. And actually, one of them, they were attacked twice in one night, about 2 hours apart. Wow. So this one is the most recent one. He went out with his friends. He and his friends were, girls, and one of them had a boyfriend. This is obviously what I know of it. And he was actually assaulted by the girl's boyfriend. So he was actually assaulted by his friend's boyfriend. What? So this is what I mean by, if allies are very important. If you are dating somebody who's homophobic, I am sorry, but I do not classify you as an ally. And that might be confrontational. That might be controversial. That's just a fact. Respect you, or yeah, I respect you, but don't say that you're an ally, or don't put your gay friend in a situation where something can happen. Yeah. Because I'm sorry about this whole thing of I don't know if he's homophobic or not. Figure that out before you get into a relationship with someone. Because I'm not saying don't date the love of your life because they're homophobic, but I'm saying if you want to do that, don't have gay friends. Because then that's just putting, that is just actively putting something, you're putting two and two together,
Yeah.
and that is going to create something. If you know that you have a homophobic, boyfriend, lover, whatever, even friend, don't put that your gay friend in a situation. And then
not only like physical assaults, right, but also slurs or like talking bad actually, right? I mean, like the mental violence or like psychological violence is also a big thing. I think that we had some unfortunate, like some gay boys committing suicide in the past years because of that. So this is real, and we do need education on that, because this is a violence and a murder just like many else. So this is just terrible that it is still happening, unfortunately. I don't follow the news anymore, so but I'm sure that that this year was not so peaceful neither.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also to jump in to what Karim and Paula are saying, I remember when I first came to the UK, I was reading about this attack that happened in London. So I think it was two girls on their date, and they were on a double-decker, and they were assaulted by a bunch of boys. Some 15, 16-year-old boys attacked them on a double-decker, and I remember reading it, and it was terrifying.
Yeah.
And then I can imagine the shock that these two people experienced, and then transfer this and multiply it to the whole community that is basically walking around with a target on their backs. And I completely agree with what Karim is saying. Like, you don't expose people to violence. Like, if you know that something could happen, do your best to prevent it. And also, in terms of suicide, I think that most of my queer friends have attempted suicide at some point. And it's just sad, because it's not only the slurs that you hear, it's not only like the comments that you get, or the looks that you get from people walking down the streets. It's reading about stuff like that, reading about attacks on people from your community, and then experiencing those attacks. And I think it's a lot. And I think definitely when it comes to the queer community, we are opening up the space about mental health, but I think we're not talking enough about it. And I think because of the activism that is going on, everyone is expected to be at their best, just not talking about what they struggle with, and just putting on a brave face. And especially when it comes to transgender people, I don't think that we pay enough attention on the mental health of transgender people and what they go through in their personal lives, in therapy, how all of this medication that they need to take and all of that hospital time affects them. And I think a lot of the times we just don't leave enough space for vulnerability. So people are there saying, oh, I'm here for you, tell me what is wrong, and I'm going to listen. But when someone gets too vulnerable, we feel uncomfortable, because we're not, as humans, we're not used to dealing with people who are crying, who are being vulnerable, when all that person is asking is for a little bit of space to be vulnerable, and asking for that space to be safe.
Yeah, I think, and this can be applied to everyone and anyone, whether you feel oppressed or you don't. Just the line, we don't leave space for vulnerability, just mic drop. Yeah, like I've got nothing to add. It's just exactly that. We need that space where people can just be vulnerable and be themselves and just share and cry and express. And yeah, that quote can literally, it can be applied to literally anything in the world. And I think so many of our problems would be resolved if we just made that space to just be vulnerable. Definitely.
I kind of want to touch upon like the political side of the violence, because we all know it went up since 2015, and we all know what was happening in the world since 2015. And I've seen so many people being like, well, I vote for this person because I don't like the other I like the other person less. But it's just a comment they made. Do you know what I mean? In terms of like homophobic behaviors, it's very often like, well, they just said it. They don't beat anyone up. Do you know what I mean? And that's where you actually leave the space for the violence to grow. And also saying things like Paula said, it's a type of violence, right? It's not all violence is physical. People need to realize that. It's just like, I want people to realize what you say, what you do matters, because the people in your immediate environment do take it as either, oh, you don't encourage this and I will stop, or like, oh, you don't mind, so I'm just going to push it a little bit more every single time.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly fantastic, and you brought that up. How do we argue against somebody who says, you know, oh, it's just a joke? Because that's one of the things that are commonly said, and it's one of the things that are hardest to argue, because it's very hard to get your point across when it's just like, oh, well, it's just a joke. But what I would say is I would approach it, you know, politely, respectfully, but just say it's just a joke until it affects you. So you can't say it's just a joke unless you come from that specific demographic and you have dealt with that issue. And I think that will shut most people up. if they aren't affected by that joke, if they haven't suffered because of that joke or because something relating to that joke, then they have no place to say it's just a joke. The same way as somebody from a community that isn't the Black community can't accept an apology on behalf of somebody from the Black community.
Thank you. I was literally about to say that. Like, I'm just so done seeing people not from communities be like, oh, we accept your apology. No, we know it was just who are you? Like, I'm sorry, but that roused me. Who are you to accept the apology on people's behalf? If someone says something, I think a joke is funny up until the point that it offends someone. So if you say a joke to 5 people and in that room, the 5 people find it funny. I think there are limits. There are some jokes that just shouldn't be said. But yeah, if those 5 people find it funny, okay. Then you say it to another 5 people or to like another 100. If one person in that group finds it offensive, it's offensive. And you can still find it funny. You can still think, oh, but it's just a joke. You still can easily apologize. And just like there's no space for vulnerability, what people struggle most, especially people who have privilege, is apologizing. Recognize that it was offensive, that you hurt someone's feelings. You're like, I'm sorry, I'll know better next time. Know your audience, be considerate. Like, it's not that hard. And yeah, people from whatever community who take it upon themselves to cast a judgment and say, oh yes, that's okay. No, it's not up to you to decide if it's like, I was talking about this with a friend yesterday, and I was talking about this podcast actually, and I just remember thinking, like, I just want to have the conversation, but I just don't even want to be the center of it, because I don't think it is even my place. Like in 2012, France passed a law finally legalizing gay marriage, and it was like, oh, are you for or against it? And of course I'm all for it, like, obviously, but realistically I don't have an opinion because I'm not entitled an opinion. Like, as a heterosexual person, gay marriage does not concern me. It's not up to me to then say, oh, I think it should be a thing, I think it shouldn't. No, I don't have an opinion. The only people that should be asked is the people who weren't allowed before 2012 to get married. It's not up to us. It's not up to heterosexual people. No, we don't have a say.
I just want to jump on it quickly. And I agree on the personal side of it, but the way politics works, especially the way referendum works, everyone's asked. So, and I've been met with a lot, in a bit of a different context, because we had a lot of abortion stuff coming up, but I've been met with a lot of people being like, well, it doesn't concern me, so I'm not going to go and vote. Or like, it doesn't concern me, so I shouldn't get a vote. But I can tell you that everybody who is against it will go and vote, because they will not have this shield of like, oh, it does not concern me. They're going to go around screaming, burn them all. So on the personal note, I fully respect that people recognize it's not your concern and things like that. but it's a part of being an ally is realizing that you need to go and you need to stand up for those things, because majority of the time you will not have enough numbers in the minority to push things through on their own.
For sure. No, it wasn't a referendum. It was just a law in place. So it's not like there was a vote. Because if there was a vote, obviously I will vote 100 times.
Okay.
But that's the thing, is it was a governmental decision. And then people were like having conversations, and people, again, that's another issue. You'd have TV programs that would have people on. None of them were members of the LGBTQ community, and they're discussing same-sex marriage. And it's just like, no, but like, in what world are you guys discussing this and not involving anyone from that community? And that's why, in that sense, I feel like, well, no, I shouldn't be asked if I feel comfortable with this, because my comfort is not relevant. The comfort that's relevant right now is LGBTQ members that want to get married and can't. Like, that's the only comfort that truly matters.
Okay, I sorry, it's just a different point, but I do find that very reflective of like how different their systems are.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
I don't know, Paul, if you agree with me, but I don't imagine marriage or abortion in our country passing by the government without referendum support. That's why my brain didn't even think about the government passing it when you said. I was like, oh, surely they had a referendum like everyone else. And I was like, oh my God, you mean you had a sensible government? How does that feel like?
Yeah, it's crazy because in Gibraltar we've just had a referendum to pass abortion, to legalize abortion now, like in 2021. One of like, I think, few places in Europe who still criminalized abortion. So and yeah, we had a referendum for gay marriage as well and stuff like that. So yeah, it's crazy.
It's just crazy.
It's crazy because having a referendum, like the LGBTQ community is small everywhere. Like if you think about like demographics, like obviously I don't agree with like having a referendum for gay and same-sex marriage, because it could very well go to, no, because the popular vote would be no. It's very unfair, I think, to have a referendum on a community that is very small.
Just want to say, I obviously don't endorse referendum in this context. I know it might have came out that way, but that's just the reality of like the country I was brought up, and it's a very clear line. They stated very clearly, if the popular vote does not support it, we will not do it because we will lose the seats in the House. I feel like people forget democracy is not just popular vote. Technically, I might be wrong, but I think by definition, democracy is also supposed to ensure the rights of minority. So in this case, the rights of the minority should take precedence over the popular vote. It's just the thing, because I think everybody thinks of democracy and they're like, popular vote over 50%, that's it, nothing else matters. But no, it was actually created with the insight of...
For sure. It's like when people claim freedom of speech. It's usually the same argument as like, no, but democracy, freedom of speech, no, but that doesn't give you the right to be an outright idiot and offend half the nation with what you're saying. It's always the same things. We're like, we're going to use part of a system that was not entirely built to oppress, just to be able to continue to oppress. Because the system in itself, I think, is flawed, but I don't think was actually built to oppress, just if we term democracy in general. And then people have take fragments of it, and use them to fit them. And so if what they want to use them is to oppress, they'll just be like, aha, but it says this, so I can do this. And it's like, no, you can't.
Yeah, when it comes to what we need to do going forward, I think it's not just the way we view government and democracy in terms of minority rights, but I also think that stemming from the government, we need to be looking more and more into healthcare and how better healthcare can be provided, especially for transgender and non-binary people, and the way they're being treated in hospitals and treated not in a medical way, but just as human beings. We need to be making sure that we make space for them to be treated as a human being, not as some kind of a test subject. And they're being referred to with the correct pronouns, correct names, not just whatever they have listed on the records. I'm hesitant to use the term dead name for transgender people who have transitioned already, but not using their dead names, but using their actual names and referring to them with their proper pronouns, and also ensuring that they have the proper medication. not just something that might become dangerous for them, but the best proper medication that will not cause them lifetime of debt.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have to be buried in debt for the rest of their lives because they want to be themselves.
For sure.
Yeah, like for me, it's of course education. This is the first thing. But second, I just thought that we should include more people from our community in a pop culture. Definitely, like in a shows, movies, stuff like that. Because like I'm not saying that it. Okay, I'm not demanding like the first role character and stuff. But even saying something like, "Oh, Anna and her girlfriend will come over to us."
Yeah.
It's simple as that. So I think we should be like more present in public spaces, so to say, in the pop culture spaces.
And just quickly on the pop culture thing, and I'm going to say this, and I hope everybody hears it, start casting LGBTQ people for LGBTQ roles. Stop getting straight men to play gay men. There's loads of gay actors out there. What are you doing? Like, please. It drives me crazy. Like, it's not that hard. They're all over the market. Hire them. That's really important. That's the only thing I'll say about that.
Just to be quick, and I feel like this goes for everyone, leave a space for people to question their identity, who they are, because if you don't question, you're never going to get where you are. I get a bit annoyed that I get asked, "Are you sure?" Whereas you never ask that a straight person. I'm like, "Are you sure? Have you ever questioned it? Can you tell me you have come to this conclusion?" Because I have. And that goes within the community, because I feel like we don't allow for a lot of questioning, and sexuality is something fluid, and I've been friends with people who sexually changed over the years, and I feel like that's so important. And also to everyone outside of it, just don't put labels on people. Just try to be more open-minded. Like, it sounds very simple, but it's just the kind of act of catching yourself. Don't assume every person you meet is straight. Don't assume, every person is cis or anything like that. Just let go of the rules. They're so annoying. Just try. I promise you, it's so freeing to just not categorize every person you lay your eyes on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As a conclusion, for one, is pride still relevant? The fact that people are in fear for their lives, the fact that people are choosing to take their own lives, the fact that people prefer to stay closeted rather than live their lives says it all. People have been queer for as long as humans have been alive. So let's just get over it. And I think with every conversation, it comes down to being inclusive and being intersectional, recognizing your privilege, recognizing other people's privilege, using your own privilege. Stop shaming privilege. Use your privilege to help others who don't have that level of privilege, and just try and be open-minded. Like, it always comes down to that. I always have the same conclusion at the end of these episodes. Like, just be mindful and try and just be considerate. That's basically it. But thank you guys. To anyone that's listened this far, thank you very much for listening. Guys, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for hosting us.
No worries. It was my pleasure. My pleasure. And I'll see you all very soon in another episode of Juicy Conversations with Julie.